When a 19-year-old walked into the courtroom alone, everyone laughed. But then he revealed he was smarter than all of them combined. The courtroom buzzed with quiet murmurs from restless spectators, their focus shifting between the stern judge at the bench and the young man standing nervously by the defense table. The walls of the Kingsford County Courthouse held the weight of 100 past verdicts, but today the atmosphere felt unusually tense. All eyes were on Adrian Brooks, a slim, unassuming figure in an ill-fitting shirt and scuffed sneakers. He clutched a handful of disorganized papers, his knuckles turning white from the pressure. Behind the bench sat Judge Barbara Stone, a name known for her authority and sharp criticisms. Her reputation as a no-nonsense jurist preceded her, and she was not one to mince words. Her courtroom was no place for dramatics or excuses. To her, this case seemed trivial, just another young person wasting the court's time. She didn't hide her disdain as she peered over her glasses at Adrian. "Mr. Brooks," she began, her tone sharp, "you do realize that the court does not take kindly to individuals showing up unprepared, don't you?" Adrian cleared his throat, a slight tremor in his voice, and replied, "Yes, Your Honor, I do." He felt the faint chuckle from the gallery and noticed the judge's subtle smirk, the look of someone who had already decided the case's outcome before it even started. Judge Barbara leaned back in her chair, arms folded. "Very well, proceed, Mr. Brooks. Let's see what you've got." From the start, it seemed like a case bound for failure. Adrian, representing himself in a minor traffic dispute, looked as if he had stumbled into the wrong room. Yet what everyone dismissed as naivety was something far more impressive, a secret that would soon reveal itself. As Adrian opened his mouth to speak, what followed left the room in stunned silence. He took a deep breath, his fingers tightening around the edges of his papers. The weight of the room pressed down on him, with hundreds of eyes scrutinizing him, doubting him, judging him. Judge Stone tapped her pen against the desk, her impatience clear. "Mr. Brooks," she said, arching an eyebrow, "if you're not ready to proceed, I'll have to dismiss this case. You understand that, don't you?" A ripple of muted laughter spread through the gallery. Adrian lifted his gaze, his voice steady despite the nerves on his face. "I'm ready, Your Honor." Barbara sighed and signaled for him to begin. "Then get on with it," she said. Adrian stepped forward, the shuffle of his worn sneakers echoing in the quiet courtroom. He glanced briefly at the opposing attorney, a seasoned professional with decades of experience evident in his confident posture. The man gave Adrian a dismissive smile, as if to say this would be over quickly. Adrian began recounting the incident that led him to court, a disputed speeding ticket. Instead of stumbling through a generic defense, he described the events with remarkable clarity, mentioning timestamps, road conditions, and even the officer's exact position when the ticket was issued. His delivery was careful, and while his tone remained humble, a strong confidence built beneath his words. The judge leaned forward slightly, her pen slowing as she took notes. Adrian continued, citing a statute from the California Vehicle Code with surprising accuracy. "According to Section 40,802, Your Honor," he stated, "the method used to determine my speed may not be admissible under the conditions outlined by the law." Judge Stone's brow furrowed. She hadn't anticipated Adrian to cite a specific statute, let alone use it so effectively. The courtroom began to shift. What started as mild amusement turned into quiet curiosity. The opposing lawyer cleared his throat, interrupting, "Your Honor, this is irrelevant. The statute doesn't apply to this case." Adrian didn't waver. "With all due respect, it does apply. And if I may," he said, walking to the evidence table and pulling out a diagram he had drawn himself. It wasn't flashy, but it was detailed, showing every angle and distance accounted for. "This diagram illustrates why the radar used couldn't have accurately measured my speed from where the officer was stationed." Judge Stone blinked, caught between skepticism and genuine surprise. Adrian had just convincingly challenged the expertise of the opposing counsel. But as he turned back to the gallery, he wasn't finished. This was just the start of his case. The courtroom, which had been restless moments ago, fell into a silence thick enough to feel. Adrian glanced around, meeting the curious stares of the audience before locking eyes with the judge again. He steadied his voice, and with each word, a quiet confidence began to grow. "Your Honor," he continued, his tone now firm, "the foundation of this case rests on the credibility of the evidence presented. If the evidence is flawed, then so is the charge against me." He turned to the opposing counsel, his words respectful but pointed. "May I ask if the prosecution can confirm the calibration of the radar gun used during the stop?" The seasoned attorney shifted in his seat, clearly caught off guard. "We do not have that documentation readily available, Your Honor, but it's a standard procedure. Adrian raised his hand slightly, not to interrupt but to request permission to continue. Judge Stone, her curiosity now piqued, nodded. Standard procedure isn't proof, Adrian replied. The law requires verification, not assumptions. Without that calibration record, the evidence cannot be considered reliable. The murmurs in the gallery grew louder as people whispered among themselves, no longer laughing at the young man who initially seemed out of place. Even Judge Stone took a breath before addressing him again. Mr. Brooks, she said, her voice softer than before, you seem to have a deeper understanding of legal processes than most. Where did you learn this? Adrian hesitated for a moment before answering. I've been studying law since I was 13, Your Honor. I passed the bar last year. Gasps rippled through the courtroom, and even the opposing attorney raised his eyebrows in disbelief. Judge Stone leaned forward, her expression hard to read. You're telling me you're a licensed attorney at your age? Yes, Your Honor. I've always had a passion for law, Adrian paused, glancing down at his papers before looking back up. I also know how people see me when I walk into a room. They assume I don't belong. The judge straightened in her chair, her demeanor shifting for the first time. The doubt in her expression gave way to something else, respect. Adrian pressed on, presenting more evidence and carefully dismantling the opposing arguments. He referenced case law with ease, articulating legal precedents in a way that even the most skeptical spectators began to nod along. He cross-examined the officer's report, pointing out inconsistencies in the narrative. Each point he made was met with either stunned silence or murmurs of approval. But as the courtroom marveled at Adrian's brilliance, one question lingered. How far could he push this case and the assumptions people had made about him? The tension in the room peaked as Adrian presented his final argument. He stood tall, his voice unwavering, and his demeanor exuded the quiet authority of someone much older. The courtroom, once filled with dismissive chuckles and skeptical glances, now hung on his every word. Your Honor, Adrian said, his tone calm yet commanding, this case is not just about a speeding ticket. It's about fairness, about ensuring that every individual, regardless of their appearance or age, is afforded the same standard of justice. His words landed heavily, silencing the last murmurs in the gallery. Judge Stone leaned forward, her chin resting on her hand as she studied Adrian. Her sharp demeanor had softened considerably, though her eyes remained critical. And what exactly are you suggesting, Mr. Brooks? Adrian took a steadying breath. I'm suggesting that the evidence presented is not only unreliable, but it also violates the principles of due process. Without proper calibration records, the radar's accuracy is questionable. Without consistent reporting, the officer's testimony is incomplete. And without clear evidence, this case should not proceed. The opposing attorney stood up abruptly, his voice filled with frustration. Your Honor, this is absurd. He's twisting technicalities to Judge Stone raised her hand, silencing him. Sit down, counselor, she said firmly, then turned her attention back to Adrian. Continue. Adrian nodded and held up his papers. I prepared a motion to dismiss the charges based on these deficiencies. The law isn't about technicalities, it's about facts, evidence, and justice. For a moment, the room seemed to hold its breath. Judge Stone reviewed the motion, flipping through its pages with a furrowed brow. Finally, she placed it down and looked up at Adrian. This is, she began, her voice trailing off. She adjusted her glasses and cleared her throat. This is remarkably well prepared, Mr. Brooks. Far beyond what I've seen from most first-year attorneys. The gallery erupted into whispers again, but a quick rap of Judge Stone's gavel silenced them. She turned to the opposing attorney, who looked visibly flustered. Counselor, do you have a rebuttal? The attorney stood, but his hesitation was clear. No, Your Honor. The defense has presented a compelling argument. Judge Stone's gaze returned to Adrian for a moment, her usual sternness softening. Mr. Brooks, she said, her voice carrying unexpected warmth, I misjudged you when you first walked into this courtroom. You have not only demonstrated a thorough understanding of the law, but you've also reminded us all of its purpose. I hereby grant your motion to dismiss the charges. The sound of her gavel echoed in the room, followed by stunned silence. Then, a slow ripple of applause began in the gallery, growing louder as spectators rose to their feet. Adrian looked around, his face a mix of relief and disbelief. Judge Stone stood as well, her expression unreadable. Court is adjourned, she said before stepping down from the bench. As she passed Adrian, she paused and extended her hand. You have a bright future ahead of you, Mr. Brooks. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Adrian shook her hand, his voice steady despite the whirlwind of emotions. Thank you, Your Honor. That means a lot. But as he left the courtroom that day, he didn't realize this was just the beginning of a journey that would challenge and inspire him far beyond those walls. The moment Adrian stepped out of the courtroom, the buzz from within followed him like a wave. Reporters, who had been waiting in the courthouse lobby, immediately turned their attention to the young man. Cameras flashing as microphones were thrust in his direction. He hesitated, caught off guard by the sudden attention. "Adrian Brooks, is it true you passed the bar at 18?" one reporter called out. "Did you expect to win today?" another shouted. Adrian raised a hand, signaling for quiet. His expression was calm, though a slight smile revealed his pride. "I came here to defend myself, just like anyone else would," he said simply. "I didn't expect anything except fairness, and that's exactly what I got." His humility only fueled the intrigue. Within hours, the courtroom clip of his closing argument was trending on social media, amassing millions of views. Comments ranged from awe at his legal skill to outrage over how the judge had initially treated him. Adrian's story was no longer confined to Kingsford County. It had become a national sensation. Back at home, Adrian's mother, Lorraine, watched the news coverage with a mix of pride and worry. She had always known her son was special, but she also understood how society often viewed young men like him. As reporters dissected every detail of the case, Lorraine's phone buzzed with calls from family, friends, and even strangers offering congratulations. "Mom," Adrian said softly as he walked through the door, his tired eyes meeting hers. Lorraine pulled him into a tight embrace, her voice thick with emotion. "You were incredible, Adrian. I just hope they see you for who you are now." But the story didn't end there. The viral attention brought both opportunities and challenges. Law firms reached out with internship offers, while advocacy groups highlighted Adrian as a symbol of perseverance in breaking stereotypes. At the same time, skeptics questioned his abilities, framing his success as a lucky anomaly rather than the result of hard work and brilliance. Meanwhile, Judge Barbara Stone faced her own reckoning. In interviews, she openly admitted to underestimating Adrian, using the experience as a personal wake-up call. "That young man reminded me of why I entered this profession in the first place," she told one journalist. Justice should never hinge on assumptions. The case that began as a simple traffic dispute sparked a larger conversation about bias, perseverance, and the power of challenging expectations. Even as the world debated his story, Adrian quietly prepared for what came next. For him, this was just the first step towards something greater. His story didn't fade into the background as just another viral moment. It lingered in conversations, classrooms, and courtrooms across the country. People debated not just the brilliance of his legal knowledge, but the deeper issues his case raised, how often society judged individuals based on their appearance, age, or circumstances before giving them a chance to prove themselves. For Adrian, the victory in court wasn't just about clearing his name, it was about showing that talent, intelligence, and determination could come from anywhere. "If we focus only on what we think someone can't do," Adrian said in an interview, "we'll never see what they're actually capable of." Judge Stone's transformation became another significant takeaway. In later cases, she was noticeably more attentive, pausing to truly listen rather than relying on her initial impressions. In one interview, she reflected, "That day in court taught me more than years on the bench ever could." Adrian Brooks showed me the power of humility, preparation, and resilience. He reminded me to look beyond the surface. For viewers and readers of Adrian's story, the moral was simple yet profound. Assumptions are easy, but fairness requires effort. By judging less and listening more, we create space for others to thrive and for their unique gifts to emerge. Adrian became a symbol of perseverance, not just for young aspiring lawyers, but for anyone who had ever been underestimated. Schools invited him to speak, law firms extended invitations, and young people across the nation saw him as proof that brilliance could emerge from the most unexpected places. But Adrian didn't let the fame distract him. He remained focused on his future, determined to use his growing platform to inspire others and challenge the barriers placed in their paths. Months after the courtroom drama, Adrian Brooks continued to forge his path, unshaken by the attention or scrutiny. He took his newfound platform as a responsibility, using it to mentor young people, advocate for fair treatment, and remind others that success is about persistence and preparation, not just opportunity. In a heartfelt speech at a community event, Adrian summed up his journey. "I didn't walk into that courtroom to prove anyone wrong. I walked in to prove myself right. The truth is, we all have moments when people doubt us. But those moments aren't walls. They're doors waiting to be opened. The audience erupted in applause, but Adrien stayed humble. To him, the journey was far from over. He planned to continue his education, fight for justice, and help others realize their potential. His story became a beacon of hope, a reminder that talent could rise above bias, and that no one's worth should be judged at face value. For viewers hearing Adrien's story, it's a call to action. Take a moment to challenge your assumptions about others. The next time you see someone and think you've already figured out their story, ask yourself, what might you be missing? Adrien's journey wasn't just about a courtroom victory. It was about resilience, self-belief, and the power of defying expectations. With every step forward, he carried the hope that his story would inspire others to take theirs.